Welcome to Afraid with Adam, where the shadows hold secrets and the unknown takes centre stage. I'm your host Adam, and each week we'll journey together into the chilling corners of our world and beyond. From haunted houses and ghostly encounters, to true crime tales that will keep you up at night, we'll explore the mysteries of the occult and the whispers of creatures that may or may not exist. Whether you're a skeptic or a believer, a true crime junkie, or someone fascinated by strange and supernatural, this is the place for you. So dim the lights, lock the doors, and grab a blanket, because on Afraid with Adam, every story has the potential to make you question the world you think you know. Are you ready to face your fears? Let's dive in. Welcome to today's episode of Afraid with Adam, where we deep dive into the mysterious, the unexplained, and the curious side of science. I'm your host Adam, and today we're going to explore one of the most enduring and fascinating myths in human history. The myth of the full moon. Why do so many people believe that the full moon can make us act strange? Is there any science behind it, or is it just folklore? Let's find out. The full moon has always held a certain lore over us. Its bright, round shape lighting up the night sky, casting eerie shadows, and illuminating the world when the sun disappears. But for centuries, people have believed the full moon does more than just light the night. From werewolves to madness, crime sprees to sleepless nights, the full moon has been blamed for all kinds of strange phenomena. But as we'll discover today, the real story of the full moon is more about psychology, culture, and maybe just a little bit of science. Let's start by going way back in time, thousands of years when our ancestors gazed up at the moon, perhaps with a sense of awe, wonder, and fear. Across cultures, the moon was often associated with gods and goddesses, magic and mystery, and the full moon in particular seemed to possess a special kind of power. Take the word lunatic, for example. It comes from lunar, the Latin word for moon. Ancient Romans believed that the moon could influence a person's mind, leading to madness or erratic behaviour. This belief was so strong that it persisted for centuries and even made its way into our legal and medical language. In Greek mythology, the goddess Selene was the personification of the moon. Selene drove her chariot across the night sky, and her beauty was said to drive men mad with desire. In other cultures, the full moon was linked to fertility, cycles of life, or even death. In Hinduism, the moon is associated with the god Chandra, who represents mind and emotion. But it's not just ancient civilizations that held these beliefs. In Europe, during the Middle Ages, it was common to believe that the full moon could transform people into werewolves. Humans who, under the light of the full moon, would shapeshift into ferocious beasts. These beliefs were so strong that even up until the 18th century, people were tried and executed for being werewolves. And even today, many of us might joke or half believe that people go a little crazy when the full moon is out. But is there any truth to this? Fast forward to today and you'll still hear the same stories. Ask any ER nurse, police officer or firefighter, and chances are they'll have a story or two about how things seem to go wild on a full moon night. More accidents, more crimes, more strange behaviours. It's something of a modern urban legend. But is there any scientific basis for it? Here's where things get really interesting. Researchers have been studying the supposed link between the full moon and human behaviour for decades, and the results may surprise you. Several studies have looked into whether the full moon affects things like crime rates, emergency room visits, and psychiatric admissions, even birth rates. After all, these are some of the most common claims about a full moon night. Yet, time and time again, the vast majority of studies find nothing. No significant increase in crimes, no spikes in hospital admissions, no baby boom during full moons. So where did these ideas come from? One reason could be something called confirmation bias. This is a cognitive bias where we tend to notice and remember events that confirm our beliefs, while ignoring the times when nothing unusual happens. So if you're a police officer working a busy night shift on a full moon, you might remember that night and think, it must have been the moon. But on a quiet moon night, you're less likely to make that connection. Another theory is that before modern lighting, the moon actually did have more of an impact on behaviour. In ancient times, when there were no streetlights or electrical lights, the full moon might have been the one of the very few nights when people could stay out later, travel, or engage in nighttime activities. This could explain why some cultures associate it more with activity or chaos. But today, with artificial lighting everywhere, the full moon's effect on our daily life is minimal. But that doesn't mean the moon doesn't affect us in other ways. One of the most well-known effects of the moon is its control over the tides. The moon's gravitational pull is strong enough to move the oceans, creating high and low tides. While this is a physical effect, it's led to the belief that the moon might also influence the human body, which is about 60% water. But while the moon's gravity does move the oceans, the effect on a human body is so minuscule that it's practically undetectable. What's more interesting, though, is the effect the moon has on our sleep. Some studies have suggested that people sleep differently during full moons. One Swiss study found that participants slept on average 20 minutes less during a full moon, had lower levels of melatonin, the hormone that regulates sleep, and reported poorer sleep quality. Now, this study had a relatively small sample size, and not all studies on moon phases and sleep have found the same results. But it does raise an intriguing question. Could the brightness of the full moon, even in our modern world, subtly impact our sleep? Even if the full moon doesn't cause madness or chaos, there's no denying that it holds a powerful place in our minds and cultures. Beliefs in the full moon's influence can lead to a self-fulfilling prophecy, where people act strangely because they expect strange things to happen. If you go into a full moon night thinking it's going to be wild, you might notice more unusual events than on a regular night. And that brings us back to the power of myth. The full moon has been woven into our stories and our fears and our imaginations for millennia. From werewolves to lunacy, to the everyday belief that a full moon equals more accidents and strange behaviours, it's a story that refuses to die, even when science says otherwise. There's also some fun facts about the moon. So before we wrap up, let's share some fun facts about our celestial neighbour, the moon. Did you know the moon is slowly drifting away from the Earth? It's moving at about 1.5 inches away each year. In the distant future, this will mean longer days on Earth as the moon's gravitational pull slows our planet's rotation. A full moon appears once every 29.5 days, but each full moon has its own name. For example, the harvest moon is the full moon closest to the autumn equinox, and the wolf moon is the first full moon of the year. The moon doesn't have an atmosphere like the Earth, which means there is no wind or weather to erode its surface. That's why footprints left by astronauts during the Apollo missions are still there, and will be for millions of years. So is the full moon to blame for sleepless nights, strange behaviours, or emergency room chaos? The science says no, but the myth endures, and it will probably continue for many years to come. The full moon may not make us howl at the sky or lose our minds, but it remains a symbol of mystery and wonder, and perhaps that's enough to keep us looking up, waiting for the next one to rise. Thank you for joining me on this journey through the myths of the full moon. Until next time, keep your eyes on the sky and maybe watch out for those werewolves just in case. If you've enjoyed this surprisingly sciencey episode of Afraid with Adam, then please like the video and also subscribe and follow on all the rest of the socials. You can hear this on Spotify, on Apple playlists and many others. Until next time, stay afraid. But you don't have to be afraid when you're with Adam.